My name is Rebecca Hale. I was 38 years old when my family skipped my husband and son's funeral for a 7-day cruise. Then, 5 days after I buried them, my mother called me from the airport and asked for $55,000. But it was not the money that changed me. It was what she said when I did not answer fast enough. She sighed into the phone as if I were being difficult. Then she said, "You don't have a family to support anymore, sweetheart." Vanessa still does. My husband Mark was in the ground. My son Ethan was 8 years old. He was in the ground beside him. And my mother used the empty chairs at my kitchen table as a reason I should write a check to the sister who had called their funeral a private tragedy. That was the moment I stopped hearing Linda Whitaker as my mother. And by the time my parents tried to shame me at their 45th wedding anniversary dinner in front of every aunt, cousin, neighbor, and church friend they could gather, I had three things in my coat pocket: one screenshot, one dated cruise photo, and one certified document they had signed years earlier and forgotten. They thought they were bringing me there to collect a debt. They had no idea I was bringing the receipt. These days, I open my restoration shop at 5 in the morning. I do not turn on the overhead lights right away. For a few minutes, the shop stays dark and soft before the machines wake up. Intis before the dust collector rattles, before the smell of cedar, varnish, and coffee fills the room. Mark's old leather chair still sits near the back wall, one arm split open, tilted slightly left. He used to say it had good bones. That was his phrase for everything we're saving. A stained table, a tired marriage, a woman who had forgotten she was allowed to want things. Good bones. Mark believed broken things deserved patience. Ethan believed broken things were treasure. He used to sit beside Mark's workbench with safety goggles too big for his face and a pencil behind one ear, sanding scraps of wood like he was building a cathedral. "Mom," he would say, holding up some crooked little piece, "look, I fixed it." Most of the time, he had only made it smaller, but sometimes smaller is enough. There is a drawing taped above my office desk now. 3 stick figures, a crooked table, and in Ethan's careful little boy letters, "Dad fixes wood, Mom fixes everything." For a long time after the accident, I could not look at it, because I had not fixed everything. I had not fixed the road. I had not fixed the ice. I had not fixed the truck that crossed the center line. And I had not fixed my family. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened at the anniversary dinner, you need to understand what happened at the funeral first. It was February. Snow along the curbs had turned gray and hard. The trees were coated in ice. Mark had taken Ethan to a winter antiques fair 2 towns over because Ethan had been saving allowance money for what he called real tools. Not toy tools, real ones. Mark promised they would look for a small hand plane, something old but usable. I almost went with them, but a customer was picking up a dining set. Then a drawer pull snapped. Then a delivery changed. Life did what life does. It made ordinary things feel urgent. So I kissed Mark by the office door, tucked Ethan's scarf tighter under his chin, and told them to bring me back something ugly enough to be interesting. Ethan grinned. "We only buy things with good bones." That was the last thing he ever said to me. The phone call came while I was sweeping sawdust into a dustpan. The number was local. The man on the other end asked if I was Rebecca Hale. Not Becky, not Mrs. TCC Bow. Hale. Rebecca Hale. That is how you know. Before they say hospital, before they say accident, before they say I'm sorry. You know because strangers use your full name when they are carrying something too heavy to put down gently. There had been ice on Route 19. A box truck lost control near the bridge. Mark tried to steer away from the other cars. The officer later told me witnesses said he probably saved a minivan with a baby seat in the back. I hated him a little for saying that. Not because it was cruel, because it gave me something noble to hold when all I wanted was my husband and my son back. At the hospital, a nurse with kind eyes took me to a small family room. Kind eyes mean they already know what room not to take you to. A doctor spoke. Forms were signed. Questions were answered. Mark was gone before the ambulance arrived. Ethan made it to the hospital. That is all I will say about that. He was 8. He loved pancakes with too much syrup. He believed every broken chair could become beautiful if you did not give up on it too soon. He deserves better than being turned into the sad part of someone else's story. Afterward, I called my mother. I do not know why. Maybe grief makes children out of grown women. I was 38, a wife, a mother, a business owner, and still, when the world ended, I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring. There was laughter behind her, a television. My sister Vanessa's voice saying something about sunscreen. I said, "Mom." She said, "Rebecca, what's wrong?" I got the words out in pieces. Accident, Mark, Ethan, hospital, gone. For 3 seconds there was silence. Then my mother said, "Oh, sweetheart." For those 3 words, I thought she was coming. Then she asked, "When are you planning the service?" I said I did not know yet. She exhaled, not a sob, a scheduling breath. "Well," she said, would it be possible to wait until after next weekend?" I stared at the salt-dried white along my shoes. What? The cruise. Rebecca, we leave tomorrow morning. My mind could not make room for it. The cruise? It's been booked for months, she said. Your father and I, Vanessa and Brian, the girls. You knew that. I had known, in the way you know things that do not matter to you. 7 days, matching shirts, shore excursions, photos on deck with bright drinks and orange sunsets. I said, "Mark and Ethan are dead." My mother lowered her voice like I had said something embarrassing in public. I know that. I'm not minimizing it. I'm only saying these things are very expensive, and the girls have been looking forward to this. It would be hard to explain. Hard to explain. My 8-year-old son's funeral would be hard to explain because my nieces wanted water slides and towel animals. I said the service would be Saturday. She said, "This Saturday?" I said yes. Another pause. Then, "Let me talk to your father." She did not say, "I am coming." She did not say, "I will book a flight back." She did not ask if I needed her. She said, "Let me talk to your father." That night, the family group chat lit up. I had not written in it. I had not asked them to cancel. I had only assumed that a funeral mattered more than a buffet at sea. Vanessa wrote first. "Of course we are heartbroken for Rebecca, but everything is non-refundable and the kids have been counting down for months. I really don't think it's fair to make everyone cancel a once-in-a-lifetime trip over a private tragedy." A private tragedy. I stared at those words until they stopped looking like English. My husband and son were not private when my mother wanted Christmas photos. They were not private when Vanessa wanted Mark to build laundry room shelves for free. They were not private when Ethan's birthday gifts needed to be posted online with captions about family love. But now that loving them required inconvenience instead of performance, they were private. My father replied, "We all grieve differently." Then my mother sent a red heart emoji. That stupid red heart under my sister's sentence like a stamp of approval. I did not respond. I took a screenshot, not because I knew I would need it. I took it because some part of me understood that one day, after enough soft voices and family pressure, I might wonder if it had really been that cruel. So I kept the proof. The funeral director, Mrs. Alvarez, helped me choose 2 caskets in a room where no one should ever have to choose 2 of anything. Arthur Bell came with me. Arthur owned the hardware store 2 doors down from my shop and had known Mark for 20 years. He did not ask if I wanted help because people who ask can be turned down. He just showed up. He sat beside me while I chose flowers, songs, and cemetery plots. At the service, the front pew was reserved for family. I had not asked for that. The church did it automatically. A little white card on the end of the pew said, "Family." That pew stayed empty. My parents were somewhere off the coast of Florida. Vanessa was on a ship with a drink package. Brian was probably complaining about Wi-Fi. My nieces were probably eating ice cream for breakfast. And the people who filled the church were not the people who shared my blood. They were Mark's customers, Ethan's teacher, the woman from the bakery who always saved him the cookie with the most sprinkles, Arthur from the hardware store, 3 men from the fire station, the owner of the antiques fair, my cousin Megan, who slipped into the second row and held my hand so hard it hurt. I was grateful for the hurt. It reminded me my hand was still there. When it was time to speak, I stood. I said Mark could tell real oak from fake veneer by knocking on it once. I said he danced badly, but with confidence. I said Ethan believed every old thing had a second life waiting inside it. I said my boys had good bones. Then I stopped because I could not breathe around the word boys. Megan came up and stood beside me. She did not speak. Sometimes that is the whole sermon. After the burial, Arthur walked me to my truck. Snow was packed hard along the cemetery road. He looked at the 2 fresh graves. Then he looked at me. "Rebecca," he said, "your family made their choice." I said nothing. He said, "Don't spend the rest of your life pretending they didn't." That was the first honest thing anyone had said to me all week. 5 days after the funeral, my mother called. Her name came up while I was standing in the kitchen. Holding coffee I had reheated 3 times and never drunk. Some broken part of me still wanted her to be sorry, real sorry, the kind that has to crawl past pride. So I answered. There was airport noise behind her, rolling suitcases, Vanessa laughing in the distance. My mother said, "Rebecca, we need to talk about the money." "No, hello, no, how are you holding up? No, I should have been there. The money." I sat down. "What money?" "The 55,000, she said, as if I had forgotten to return a sweater. I closed my eyes. "Mom, I buried Mark and Ethan 5 days ago." "I know that," she said, "but life doesn't stop for the rest of us." The rest of us. That was how she divided the world. There was me, sitting in a house full of ghosts, and there was the rest of them. Arriving home sunburned and inconvenienced, she told me Vanessa was in trouble. Mortgage behind, credit cards maxed out, Brian's hours cut, the girls scared. The family needed to come together. They wanted me to give Vanessa $55,000. Not lend, give, but my mother was not calling it giving. She was calling it repayment. "You remember we helped you with the shop," she said. "Your father and I gave you that money when you needed it." "Now your sister needs help," I said. "You gave me a gift." Her voice cooled. That is a convenient way to remember it. I looked toward the hallway where Ethan's blue sneakers still sat by the door, one lace untied. I had stepped over them every day because moving them felt like admitting he would not come back to tie them himself. My mother continued, "Vanessa has children, Rebecca, a home, a family. You have to think beyond yourself." I said nothing. Maybe she thought I was softening. Then she said it. "You don't have a family to support anymore, sweetheart. Vanessa still does. There are sentences that do not simply hurt you. They organize everything. They take years of small dismissals, unequal forgiveness, and overlooked birthdays, and make them stand in a straight line where you can finally see them. I saw myself at 9 years old, making Vanessa cereal because Mom was tired. I saw myself at 16 giving up a summer job check because Vanessa needed a pageant dress. I saw Mark fixing my parents' porch railing for free while my father criticized the angle. I saw Ethan sitting alone at a family barbecue while my nieces opened gifts my mother had bought just because. I saw the empty pew. I saw the red heart emoji. And something in me went very still. Not angry. Not yet. Still. I asked, "What exactly do you think I owe?" My mother sighed. "Don't be dramatic. What do you think I owe?" "The 55,000 your father and I put into that little furniture business. That little furniture business, the shop that paid my mortgage, the shop where Mark spent weekends, the shop where Ethan learned to hold a sanding block." I said, "You signed a gift letter?" Silence. Then she said, "That was for the bank?" "Yes," I said, "it was." "Rebecca, no repayment expected, not a loan, not an investment. A gift." Her voice sharpened. "You would really hide behind paperwork while your sister loses her house?" I almost laughed. After everything, she still thought paperwork was something people hid behind. I had built my adult life on paperwork. Invoices, receipts, purchase agreements, insurance forms, condition reports. The world runs on quiet pages people only respect when they need them. I said, "I'm not discussing this today. You need to think about what Mark would want." That was the... See, first time she said his name. Not at the hospital, not before the funeral, not in the group chat. She saved my husband's name until it could be used as a lever. "You don't get to tell me what Mark would want," I said. "Grief is making you cruel." "No," I said, grief is making me accurate." Then I hung up. The call started immediately. My father, Vanessa, my mother again, Brian. Then the group chat. Dad wrote, "This is not how family behaves." Vanessa wrote, "I can't believe you're doing this to my girls after everything Mom and Dad did for you." Brian wrote, "You're sitting on insurance money while kids might lose their home." Think about that. My mother wrote, "We are all worried about who you are becoming," who I was becoming. That is a funny thing for people to say when you stop being useful. They never worry about who you are while you are paying, driving, fixing, forgiving, showing up, and staying quiet. They only get concerned when you hand the weight back. I did not respond. I took screenshots. All of them. Proof is not for the people who hurt you. Proof is for the day they try to make you forget. The next evening, Arthur came by with pie in a paper bag. I was sitting on the stairs, holding Ethan's hoodie. He set the bag on the counter. "Pie?" I asked. "For dinner?" "Grief doesn't follow the food pyramid," he said. That was the first time I almost smiled. He sat beside me, not too close. Arthur understood space. After a while, he said, "They still calling?" I nodded. "You answering?" I shook my head. "Good. She's my mother," I said. Arthur stared at the wall. "No," he said quietly. "She's the woman who knew where the funeral was." That sentence settled in the hallway like dust. The $55,000 had started 6 years earlier. Back then, the shop was not mine. It belonged to Walter Finch, who had restored furniture in our town since the 70s. He was old, stubborn, and mean to men who used the word vintage too loosely. But he liked me. He said I had patient hands. When his knees got bad, he offered to sell me the building, tools, and client list for less than they were worth. Still more than I had. Mark and I had savings. Not enough. The bank would finance part of it, but I needed a stronger down payment. My parents offered the rest at Christmas dinner, publicly, in front of Vanessa, Brian, the kids, and Aunt Carol. My mother put an envelope beside my plate and said, "For your future." Inside was a cashier's check for $55,000. I cried. I thanked them until my voice broke. And because the bank is not sentimental, they required a gift letter. A formal letter stating the money was not borrowed, no repayment was expected, and the funds were a true gift. I remember driving to my parents' house with the form in a folder. I remember my father joking, "Guess this means we can't charge interest." I remember my mother signing with her good pen. I remember Vanessa watching from the kitchen island, her mouth tight because for once the room was not about her. Then I filed the document with my loan papers and moved on with my life. I thought gratitude meant remembering a gift kindly. My family thought gratitude meant letting them rename it whenever they wanted something back. The week after my mother's call, the story spread. Poor Vanessa, selfish Rebecca, insurance money, ungrateful daughter, parents who had sacrificed, a sister who refused to help. By the time Megan called, she sounded careful. Becca, she said, I'm only asking because I don't trust how they're telling it. That was the first decent sentence anyone in my family had offered. What are they telling? That your parents loaned you money for the shop, and now you won't pay it back, even though Vanessa's house is about to go into foreclosure. I looked at Mark's empty chair. They skipped the funeral. Megan. I know. She called it a private tragedy. I know. My mother asked me for money 5 days after I buried them. I know, Megan said. I was there. I saw the front pew. It is strange what breaks you, not always cruelty. Sometimes being believed is the thing that finally makes you cry. Megan told me there were whispers about my parents' anniversary dinner. 45 years, church hall, catered meal, speeches. I think they're planning to bring it up there, she said. Of course. They were. My parents loved an audience, as long as they controlled where it looked. Megan said, maybe don't go. That would have been sensible. Stay home, lock the door, let them perform without me. But they had skipped my funeral. They had called my grief private. They had asked for money from the hole where my family used to be. And now they wanted witnesses. For the first time in months, I thought, good, let them have witnesses. But before that dinner, there was the night I almost paid. I wish I could say I was strong from the beginning. I was not. I was tired. Cruel families do not always win because they are clever. Sometimes they win because they know how to exhaust you. The calls kept coming, the messages, the guilt, the suggestion that Mark would be disappointed. Vanessa sent photos of her daughters with captions about losing their bedrooms. My mother wrote, I hope you can live with this, as if I had not already been living with the worst thing imaginable. One Thursday night, I opened my checkbook. $55,000 would not ruin me, but it would wound me. It would take the cushion Mark and I had built. It would delay repairs at the shop. It would make payroll tight if business slowed. But it might make the noise stop. That is what I told myself. Not that they deserved it. Not that I owed it. Just that silence might be worth the price. I wrote Vanessa Cole on the payee line. My hand stopped before the numbers. Then Arthur knocked once on the back door and came in. He had a key to the shop and no sense of boundaries when he was worried. He saw the checkbook. His face changed, not angry, sad. That was worse. Rebecca, he said, I closed it too late. I just want them to stop. He sat across from me in the chair Mark should have been sitting in. Then he said, don't pay people to prove they can abandon you twice. They'll say I'm selfish. They already say that. They'll say Mark would have helped. Mark would have stood between you and that door with a crowbar. That almost made me smile. Arthur leaned forward. You are not buying peace, Becky. You're renting a cage. I started crying then. The kind that bends your whole body forward until you have to hold the edge of the table. Arthur waited. Then he put one big hand over mine and said, let them be loud. You stay accurate. The next morning, I tore the check into pieces and threw it away under coffee grounds. Then I went to the shop. For the first time since the funeral, I cleaned one corner of Mark's bench. His pencil was still there, his tape measure, a cracked coffee mug, a stack of sandpaper sorted by grit, because Mark believed chaos was a moral failing. Under a folded canvas cloth, I found his notebook. I had seen it 100 times and never opened it because it was his. Objects become borders after death. You do not cross them until you can survive what is on the other side. I sat on his stool and opened it. Measurements, sketches, client notes. Then, near the end, a page dated 3 days before the accident. At the top, Mark had written, "Things we build when the hard part is over." Underneath was a list. Expand finishing room, replace south windows, teach Ethan dovetails when he's 10, put our real name on the sign, and then the line that took my breath away. Hale and Son Restorations. Below it, in smaller writing, so he knows this place is his too. I pressed my hand over the page. My mother had said I did not have a family to support anymore, but there it was, a family, a name, a future Mark had imagined so clearly that part of it still existed on paper. I took Ethan's drawing down from the wall. Dad fixes wood, Mom fixes everything. I set it beside the notebook. Then I said out loud to the empty shop, "I can't fix this." The words echoed off the concrete floor. Then I said, "But I can build what you named. That was the morning I stopped waiting to feel strong. I went to work anyway. By noon, I had called the sign painter. By 3, I had emailed the historic inn about a restoration contract I had been too numb to accept. By 5, I had pulled the bank file from my cabinet and found my old copy of the gift letter. 6 years old, slightly yellow at the edge. My parents' signatures at the bottom. The words plain enough for a child to understand. This money is a gift. No repayment is expected. This is not a loan. I read it 3 times. Then I called the bank and asked for a certified copy. The woman said there would be a small fee and a few business days. A small fee and a few business days. That was all it took to turn memory into evidence. I put my copy in a folder. I printed Vanessa's private tragedy message. I saved the cruise photo my mother had posted the morning after the funeral. In the photo, they stood on deck in bright shirts, wind in their hair, drinks in their hands. My mother's caption read, "Making memories with the people who matter most." The timestamp was clear. The morning after Mark and Ethan were buried. You can explain away a lot if people want to help you. You cannot explain away a date, not forever. My family had forgotten what I did for a living. I restored old things. I knew how to uncover what was underneath. The new sign went up on a Friday morning. Dark green background, cream letters, Hale and Son Restorations. In the lower corner, the painter added a tiny handplane, copied from the $8 tool Mark bought Ethan at the fair. When the sign settled into place, one shortly or mines. Arthur made a sound in his throat and turned away. I pretended not to notice. Some grief deserves privacy, even when it belongs to more than one person. The first customer who saw the sign was Mrs. Kaplan. She stood on the sidewalk for a long time before coming in. Her eyes were wet. "That's a good name," she said. I said, "It was Mark's." She nodded like that explained everything. The historic inn contract came through at the end of March. 22 pieces from a property built in Chelsea, 1898. Headboards, writing desks, side tables, carved chairs, 2 wardrobes, 1 enormous front desk with cigarette burns older than I was. The owners wanted the furniture restored, not replaced. Good bones. Mark would have loved it. I signed the contract with his notebook open beside me. Then I cried for exactly 4 minutes, washed my face in the utility sink, and called 2 part-time finishers I trusted. That was how rebuilding happened. Not in one brave moment, in ugly little pieces, a phone call, an invoice, a morning where you get out of bed because payroll is Friday. Meanwhile, my family got louder. Vanessa posted sad quotes online about sisters who forget where they came from. My mother commented with praying hands. My father liked everything. Brian shared one post with the caption, "Real men protect their families." Wish everyone understood that. Brian, who had borrowed Mark's pressure washer and returned it broken. Brian, who once asked Mark to help him move a sectional and disappeared for 3 hours because his back felt weird. Brian now had opinions about protecting families. I did not respond. I screenshotted. Megan called more often. One afternoon, she called from her car. I need to tell you something. What happened? I was at Aunt Carol's. Your mom and Vanessa were there. They're saying you got almost $500,000 in insurance money. I laughed once, dry and sharp. I did not. I figured. Even if I had, my son's death is not community property. Megan went quiet. Then she said, Vanessa said you're punishing her because she has what you lost. The room went still. What? She said you can't stand seeing her with Brian and the girls because it reminds you Ethan is gone. There are lies that insult your actions, and there are lies that trespass into your dead. That one walked into my son's room and put its hands on his things. I looked at Ethan's handplane on the shelf. Thank you for telling me. Becca, they're making people believe you're unstable. Good, I said. Good. If they believe I'm unstable, they won't expect me to be prepared. That was the first time I surprised myself, not because it sounded harsh, because it sounded clear. The longer my family talked, the more careless they became. Cruel people make a common mistake. They confuse silence with weakness. They think if you are not defending yourself, it means you have no defense. Sometimes silence is just a filing cabinet. Mine was getting full. Then Megan found out the truth about Vanessa's emergency. It came through a hair salon, because families like mine leak truth in places they think do not count. Vanessa and Brian had taken out a home equity line the year before. Not for medical bills, not because Brian's hours had been cut, for renovations, white oak cabinets, imported tile, a professional range they could not afford, custom lighting. Then Vanessa poured more money into an online children's clothing boutique, convinced she would make everything back by Christmas. She did not. Inventory sat in boxes. Credit cards filled up. The mortgage fell behind because they kept moving money around, assuming someone would save them before consequences arrived. Someone met my parents. Then my parents realized they could not cover it, so someone became me. Megan sent what she could legally find. Public notices, screenshots of Vanessa bragging about the remodel, dated posts about the boutique launch, a county, notice about missed tax payments. It painted a different picture from the one my family had sold. Vanessa was not drowning because life had been cruel. She was drowning because she built a kitchen on credit and expected my dead husband to pay for it. I printed everything. Not because I plan to use all of it. Like, you do not need to throw every page. You need to know which page will land. So one evening, my mother came to the shop. Her silver SUV parked across the street while I was locking up. For one foolish second, I wondered if she had come to apologize. She got out wearing a cream coat and sunglasses, even though the sun was almost gone. She looked up at the sign. Hale and Son, she said. Not hello? Not how are you? Just the name. As if she were deciding whether I was allowed to have it. Mom, I said. She flinched slightly, maybe because I said it like a title I was returning. You've been busy. Yes. Vanessa says you won't take her calls. That's true. She's your sister. She called my husband and son's funeral a private tragedy. My mother's mouth tightened. She worded that poorly. No. She worded it honestly. She folded her hands around her purse. Rebecca, people are starting to talk. That was the emergency, not what she had done, not who she had abandoned. People were starting to talk. I said, about what? About the family? About the cruise? About things they don't understand? They understand dates? Her eyes sharpened. So this is what you want? To punish us forever? I looked through the shop window and saw Ethan's drawing on the wall. Dad fixes wood, Mom fixes everything. I wanted you at the funeral, I said. Something almost human crossed her face, then pride caught it. You have no idea what position we were in. I know exactly what position you were in. Deck 12. According to the photo. Her cheeks colored. You're being cruel. No, I said, I'm being specific. She stepped closer. Your father and I helped you build this place? Yes. And now your sister may lose her home. Yes. And you can stand here under that expensive new sign and tell me you feel nothing? The sign cost $600. Vanessa's stove cost more than my first car. But I did not say that. I said, I feel plenty. I just don't confuse feeling with owing. My mother's voice dropped. Be careful, Rebecca. When people see who you really are, you may not like standing alone. There it was. The threat dressed as concern. I opened the shop door. I stood alone at the cemetery. This is easier. She had no answer. The certified copy from the bank arrived the next Monday. Linda Whitaker, Paul Whitaker. Their signatures in blue ink, the bank stamp, the date. Funds are a gift. No repayment is expected. This is not a loan in any form. I asked for 2 more certified copies. The loan officer looked at my face and did not ask why. Smart man. On the way back, I stopped at the cemetery. 1 stone, 2 names. I stood there with the bank envelope in my hand. I found it, I said. The cemetery gave no answer. It never does. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. The wind moved through the trees. I don't want to become them. That was my real fear. Not that they would yell. Not that I would lose money. That if I exposed them, if I let the truth embarrass them, some part of me would become cruel too. Then I remembered something Mark had once said when a customer tried to blame him for damage that had clearly been there for years. Truth isn't mean just because it has consequences. I looked at Ethan's name. 8 years old. A whole life reduced to a line between dates. My family had called him private. They had used his absence as arithmetic. They had tried to turn the worst thing that ever happened to me into Vanessa's solution. I put the envelope under my arm. All right, I said. For the first time since the phone call, I felt direction. Not peace, direction. There is a difference. The invitation to my parents' anniversary dinner arrived 3 days later. Cream cardstock, gold lettering, 45 years of love math, faith, and nourrissant and malé. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, was a note. We hope you'll come. It would mean so much to heal together. Heal together. Not apologize, not acknowledge, heal, as if the wound had appeared naturally and everyone had equal responsibility to close it. Megan called that night. They're planning something, she said. Uncle Paul is going to make a speech. Vanessa is going to talk about the girls. Your mom is going to cry. My mother can cry on command. They think you'll either agree to help or look heartless refusing. That was the trap. 2 exits, both built by them. If I gave them money, they won. If I refused in front of everyone, they won differently. What time is dinner? I asked. 6. I'll be there at 6. Do you want me to sit with you? I thought about it. I thought about the empty front pew at the funeral. No, I said. Sit wherever they put you. You shouldn't be alone. I won't be. I looked at the folder on my desk. I'm bringing everyone who told the truth. The church hall looked exactly how I expected. Round tables, white cloths, gold napkins, a banner that said 45 years together where you were singing you're singing Sirox. Cake with my parents' wedding photo printed in frosting. Like there were about 60 people there, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, church friends, people who had not come to the funeral but had opinions about how grief should behave. I arrived at 6:05, not late enough to look dramatic. Late enough that everyone saw me walk in. Conversation dipped. My mother came toward me with open arms. I let her hug the air near my shoulders. "Rebecca," she whispered. "I'm so glad you came." "I'm sure." Vanessa appeared behind her in a navy dress, eyes already shiny. She was preparing. Brian stood near the punch bowl, watching me with the hard expression of a man who knew he was in over his head but had chosen arrogance as a flotation device. My father Rickersiauer thought versus the front, laughing with two men from church. He looked over, lifted a hand, and smiled like a man welcoming back a difficult child. Dinner moved slowly. People watched me in little glances. My mother gave a speech about marriage, faith, and family. She talked about weathering storms together. She did not mention the storm she had sailed away from. Then my father stood. He tapped his glass. The room quieted. He thanked everyone for coming. He praised my mother. He talked about sacrifice. Then his voice shifted. "Family is not just about celebration," he said. "It is about responsibility. It is about remembering who helped you when you had nothing." People began looking at me. My father continued. "Sometimes, after tragedy, people lose their way. They forget that others still need them. They forget debts of the heart." Debts of the heart. My mother lowered her eyes. Vanessa put a hand over her mouth. Brian stared at me like I was supposed to shrink. My father looked directly at me. "Rebecca, your mother and I love you. We know you have suffered. But Vanessa is suffering too. Your sister may lose her home. Her children may lose their stability. Years ago, we gave you what you needed to build your business. Tonight, in front of the people who love this family, I am asking you to do the right thing." Silence. Every eye in the room found me. There it was, the stage, the trap, the debt. I stood slowly. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I said, "Dad, before I answer, I want to make sure everyone understands what you are asking." He smiled, relieved. He thought I was obeying. He said, "We're asking you to repay what you owe." I nodded. "What I owe?" Then I reached into my coat and took out the first page, the screenshot. I unfolded it and placed it on the nearest table. "This is from the family group chat," I said. The night after I told my mother Mark and Ethan had died. The room went still. My mother's eyes widened. "Rebecca," she warned. I ignored her. I read Vanessa's words. "Of course we are heartbroken for Rebecca, but everything is non-refundable and the kids have been counting down for months. I really don't think it's fair to make everyone cancel a once-in-a-lifetime trip over a private tragedy." Private tragedy. The word sounded different in the church hall, smaller, uglier, less protected by a phone screen. Vanessa whispered, "I didn't mean it like that." "You wrote it like that," I said. Aunt Carol put a hand over her mouth. Someone in the back murmured, "They didn't go to the funeral?" My father said sharply, "This is not the time." I looked at him. "You chose the time." Then I took out the second page, the cruise photo. I held it where people could see. My mother posted this the morning after the funeral. The caption says, "Making memories with the people who matter most." I set it beside the screenshot. The timestamp is clear. My mother's face went pale. People leaned closer. Dates do what tears cannot. They arrange the truth. My father said, "We were grieving too." Arthur's voice was not in the room, but I heard him anyway. "Stay accurate." I said, "You grieved from deck 12. A few people looked away. Not from me, from them. Vanessa stood. "This is cruel. My children could lose their home." I turned to her. "Then I am sorry for them." "But you're not sorry for me?" "I am sorry. You built a kitchen on credit and called it an emergency." Brian snapped, "Watch it." There it was. the male voiceman like Brian use when facts start sounding disrespectful. I looked at him. Brian, the last thing you fixed in my life was Mark's pressure washer and you broke it. A few people actually laughed. Small, surprised. Brian's ears went red. Vanessa hissed, "How dare you bring up our finances? You brought up mine first." My father slapped his hand on the table. "Enough! This is not about kitchens. This is about a debt." And there it was, the word I had been waiting for. Debt. I reached into my coat and took out the third page. The certified copy. Stamped. Dated. Official. A plain piece of paper with the power to make years of manipulation look ridiculous. I set it beside the screenshot in the cruise photo. "This," I said, "is the gift letter from the bank." My father's face changed before anyone read it. That told me he remembered. The kitchen table, the form, the blue pen, the joke about interest. My mother whispered, "Rebecca," not angry now, afraid. I looked at her. "You both signed it." Aunt Carol stood and moved closer. So did two cousins. I read from the document. "The funds are a gift. No repayment is expected." "This is not a loan in any form." I looked at my father. "In any form." He opened his mouth, closed it. "That was for financing purposes." "Yes," I said, "legal purposes. It was understood." "No," I said, "it was signed." The room absorbed that. People understand signatures. They understand that names on paper can do what words in kitchens try to undo. My mother said, "We never would have helped you if we knew you would treat us this way." I turned to her. "What way?" She had no answer, so I gave her one. "Like people who skipped my son's funeral and came home with their hands out?" That was the sentence that broke something. Not in me, in the room. The story my parents had carried so carefully split down the middle. You could see people deciding where to put their eyes. On me, with the documents. On my mother, with the cruise photo. On Vanessa, whose tears had gone suddenly quiet. Aunt Carol said, "Linda, is this true?" My mother gripped the back of her chair. "We were in a terrible position. You were on a cruise," I said. My father tried again. "We all process grief differently." "No," I said. "You missed the funeral differently." Vanessa began crying harder. "My children could lose their home." I looked at her for a long moment. The old reflex twitched. The one that had packed her lunches when we were kids. The one that had handed over birthday money because Vanessa wanted something. The one that believed being the older sister meant becoming a second mother while my own mother saved her energy for the favorite child. Then I looked at the empty corner where my nieces were not standing. Thank God they were not there. That was one kindness Vanessa had accidentally given me. I said, "Then call the bank, sell the stove, return what inventory you can. But do not ask me to finance your consequences with my son's absence." Vanessa flinched. "You want everyone to hate me?" "No," I said. She blinked. That surprised her. "I wanted you to say his name." Her face went blank. "Whose?" There it was. The answer to a question I'd not meant to ask. "My son's," I said. "You have said money, house, your girls, family. Not once since the accident have you said Ethan's name to me." She looked away first. I didn't know what to say. "You knew how to ask for $55,000. Megan's chair scraped back. Brian muttered, "This is ridiculous." Megan turned on him. "Brian, shut up!" That was the first time all night I nearly smiled. My mother sat down like her knees had loosened. My father stayed standing because sitting would look like defeat, and he feared that more than being wrong. He pointed at the bank letter. "Fine, legally, maybe it was a gift, but morally..." I laughed once. I could not stop it. "Morally?" He flinched. "You want to talk about morally?" I lined up the 3 pages carefully. Message, photo, gift, letter. Then I said the 3 things I had come to say. To my father. "You taught me to keep records. I'm sorry you forgot I listened. To Vanessa, you called my husband and my son a private tragedy. I will remember that every time you call yourself family. Then I turned to my mother. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup. You told me I didn't have a family to support anymore. You were wrong. I support their name every time I unlock my shop. Her lips parted. Rebecca? Sweetheart. No. The word was quiet, but it cut clean. You don't get sweetheart anymore. She looked like I had slapped her. Maybe I had, with the only hand I had left. My father said, "Are you really going to walk out on your family?" I looked around the room, at the people who now knew, at Megan, standing with her hands clenched, at Aunt Carol, staring at my mother like she had become a stranger, at the cake, at the banner, at the gold napkins, at the whole beautiful stage they had built for my humiliation. And I said, "No, I already buried my family. I'm walking out on the people who missed it." Nobody spoke. Not one person. I walked toward the door. Behind me, Vanessa said, "Becca, I'm scared." I stopped. Not because she deserved it, because once, long ago, I had loved her before I understood love could be assigned like chores. I turned. For the first time all night, she looked like a person instead of a performance. She was scared. The house might go. The life she had decorated on credit might crack open in front of everyone. I said, "I know." Her face softened with hope. Then I said, "That still does not make it mine to save." And I left. Arthur was at the shop when I got there. The lights were on low. 2 mugs of coffee sat on my desk. He looked at my face and did not ask for details right away. That was mercy. Finally, he said, "How'd it go?" I took off my coat. "They had a stage." He nodded. "And?" "I brought paperwork." Arthur smiled then, small, proud. "Mark would have liked that." I sat in Mark's old leather chair, and let myself shake. Not because I was weak, because my body had carried the truth into a room full of people who wanted me to drop it. The next week, the family story changed. It always does when lies lose their first home. At first, my parents said I had ambushed them. Then people asked why they had brought up money publicly. They said grief had made me unstable. Then people asked why unstable grief had better documentation than they did. Vanessa said the gift letter was a technicality. Then someone asked whether she had really remodeled her kitchen while behind on bills. Brian said I had humiliated his family. Then someone reminded him that he had tried to humiliate me first. The church ladies were the fastest. They can move information through a town faster than emergency sirens. By Sunday, half the congregation knew my parents had skipped the funeral. By Tuesday, everyone knew about the cruise photo. By Friday, the phrase private tragedy had reached people who had never met Vanessa. My mother stopped posting family photos. My father resigned from the church finance committee, officially to focus on family matters. Vanessa and Brian sold the professional range first, then the imported tile they had not installed yet, then the boutique inventory in sad little bundles online. It was not enough. The house went into foreclosure that winter. I did not celebrate. That surprised some people. They expected revenge to feel like champagne. It felt more like weather, cold, heavy, necessary. Vanessa and Brian separated the following spring. I heard it from Megan. Not because I asked, but because families still leak news even after you leave them. My parents moved into a smaller house outside town. My mother sent one letter. I opened it because the envelope looked too formal to ignore. Inside were 4 pages about her pain, her stress, her intentions, her fear that I had let grief poison me. There was one sentence that said, "I am sorry you felt unsupported." I folded the letter back into the envelope. Then I wrote on the outside, "Return to sender." No, Forwarding address for almost apologies. I never sent that line. I just threw the letter away. Some things are for your own record, not theirs. Life did not become beautiful all at once. That is not how grief works. The house stayed too quiet. I still found Ethan in ordinary places. A cereal bowl in the cabinet, a tiny sock behind the dryer, a dentist appointment reminder that arrived 6 weeks too late. I found Mark in receipts, pencil marks, and the smell of rain on his brown jacket. But the shop changed. Hale and Son restorations grew. The historic in-job led to another contract, then another. I hired Tessa full-time, then Luis, then a retired cabinet maker named Jim who said he only wanted part-time work and then showed up 6 days a week. Arthur kept coming by with coffee, pie, bad advice, and good silence. And one evening, he brought me something wrapped in a blue shop towel, a small oak nameplate, hand-carved, Ethan Hale Workshop Fund. I stared at it. Arthur cleared his throat. Maybe you take on a kid or two in the summer, he said. Teach them sanding, safety, small repairs. Mark would have liked that. Ethan would have bossed everybody around. I laughed and cried at the same time. It came out ugly. Arthur pretended to inspect a clamp on the wall. I can't start a fund, I said. Sure you can. I don't even know what I'm doing next week. Nobody does. Put the name on the wall anyway. Let your life catch up. So I did. The first summer, we had 4 teenagers. One girl barely spoke for 2 weeks. Then she repaired a wobbly stool so cleanly that Arthur whistled and she smiled like sunrise. One boy made a lopsided birdhouse nobody was allowed to criticize because he'd never finished anything before. Every kid learned 2 things: sand with the grain, and never call something worthless just because you do not know how to fix it yet. I moved Ethan's handplane into a small glass case by the front desk. The label read, Ethan Hale's first real tool, $8, good bones. Customers asked about it, not all of them, only the ones who noticed. When they did, I said his name. At first, saying Ethan hurt. Then it became a way of keeping him from being turned into absence. My family had tried to use him as subtraction. I made him part of the sign, part of the workshop, part of every kid who learned to sand with the grain. That is not the same as having him back. Nothing is. Do not let anyone sell you legacy as replacement. It is not. It is only a lamp you light in a room you did not want to enter. But some nights, a lamp is enough. Megan and I became close in a way we had never been before. Not dramatic, no big declarations, just steady. She came by on Thursdays with takeout. She helped with workshop paperwork. She told me which relatives were still whispering and which ones had gone quiet. Most went quiet. A few reached out. Some apologized. Well, some apologized badly. Aunt Carol came to the shop with an old cedar chest that had belonged to her mother. She stood in my office looking at Ethan's drawing for a long time. Then she said, I should have been there. I said, yes. She nodded. No excuses, no crying for herself. Just yes. That was why I took the chest. Not because she was family, because she told the truth without making me hold her guilt. When the chest was finished, she paid the full invoice and donated the same amount to Ethan's workshop fund. I did not know what to do with that. So I said, thank you. Sometimes that is enough too. I never reconciled with my parents. People ask that sometimes when they hear pieces of the story. They want a softer ending. They want my mother to arrive at the shop one day with Ethan's favorite toy and a perfect apology. They want my father to cry. They want Vanessa to admit she was jealous and scared and wrong. They want the family photo restored like an old table. But not everything has good bones. That is the part Mark understood better than I did. Some pieces are too warped. Some rot runs too deep. Some structures only stand because everyone has agreed not to lean on them. My parents sent cards on holidays. I returned the first 2. Then I threw the rest away unopened. Vanessa sent one message through Megan after her divorce became official. Tell Becca I'm sorry for how everything happened. Megan asked if I wanted to respond. I said, no. Maybe that sounds unforgiving. Maybe it is. All I know is that my life got quieter after I stopped translating almost apologies into love. The shop grew to 4 employees. The technical school made our workshop part of their summer program. A local paper wrote an article about Hale and Son restorations and the youth fund. The reporter asked why I chose the name. I told her the truth. My husband wrote it down before he died. My son loved this place. I just kept the promise. She asked if the business had always been family run. I looked at Ethan's handplane in the glass case, then at Mark's notebook, opened beneath it to the page that said Hale and Son Restorations. Yes, I said, just not in the way people think. On the first warm Saturday of May, we held an open house at the shop. Tessa said the workshop kids needed to show their families what they had made. Arthur said we needed hot dogs. Luis said hot dogs were not food and brought tamales. Megan made lemonade. We set up tables outside. The teenagers displayed small shell elves, repaired stools, picture frames, a cedar box, and that lopsided birdhouse. I stood under the sign and watched people move in and out. For a second, in the corner of my eye, I imagined Ethan weaving between them with goggles on his head, telling everyone they were holding the sandpaper wrong. I imagined Mark leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, pretending not to be proud. The images hurt, but they were welcome. That was new. Megan came to stand beside me. You okay? I looked at the shop, at the sign, at the kids, at Arthur arguing with Luis about mustard, at Tessa showing a girl how to hold a clamp, at Ethan's handplane in the glass case, at Mark's notebook, open beneath it. I think so, I said. Across the street, a silver SUV slowed. For one sharp second, my body knew before my mind did. My mother. My father was driving. They both looked. Neither waved, neither came in. They kept going. Megan saw. Her hand brushed mine. You want me to say something mean? I smiled. No. You sure? I have several options. I'm sure. The SUV disappeared at the corner. I waited for the old ache. It came. Smaller. Not gone, but smaller than the sound of the shop behind me. That was enough. A little girl was standing by Ethan's handplane, reading the label. She looked up at me. Was this your son's? I knelt beside her. Yes. Did he fix things? I swallowed. He was learning. She considered that. Then she said, I'm learning too. I smiled. Then he would have liked you. She grinned and ran back to her mother. That evening, after everyone left and the shop smelled like sawdust, lemonade, and warm pavement, I took Ethan's drawing down from the office wall. Not because I was putting it away, because it needed a better frame. Dad fixes wood. Mom fixes everything. For years, I believed that sentence was love. After the accident, it became accusation. Now I could see it for what it was. A child's faith. Beautiful. Impossible. Too heavy for one woman to carry forever. So I built a frame from walnut scraps Mark had saved. I sanded it slowly. I joined the corners clean. I rubbed oil into the grain until the wood warmed under my hands. Then I set the drawing inside. When I hung it back on the wall, I stood there for a long time. Dad fixes wood. Mom fixes everything. No, I whispered. And for once, the correction did not hurt. Mom fixes what she can. That is what I know now. I could not fix the road. I could not fix the ice. I could not fix the truck. I could not fix my mother. I could not fix Vanessa. I could not fix a family that only loved me when I was useful. But I could fix the lie. I could fix the record. I could fix the name above the door. I could fix chairs, tables, boxes, frames, and the kind of silence that teaches children they do not matter. I could build a room where Ethan's name was spoken with warmth instead of pity. I could build what Mark named. And every morning when I unlock the shop, I look up at the sign. Hale and Son Restorations. Some people think revenge is making others suffer. They are wrong. The best revenge is when the lie no longer gets to live in your house. The best revenge is when the people who counted your losses as weakness have to watch you. Turn them into a door, and then walk through it without them.